co-director, Dr. Pamela Carter-Nolan, and we serve as co-directors of the professional development component of the RCMI program, which is led by Dr. Sutherland. So today we are very happy to have with us and pleased to have with us one of our very own, Ms. Stacy McCray, who will be talking to us about the NIH Public Access Policy. So in terms of, what do you call it? In terms of a background about Mrs. McCray, Ms. McCray, she is the program manager of the Howard University Research Centers and Minority Institutions program. Ms. McCray provides administrative support to users, project leaders, and directors of the program. She also assists with the daily operations of the RCMI program. This administrative support includes coordination of the RCMI workshops and seminars, developing marketing material for the program on campus, and support for the biannual RCMI symposium. Ms. McCray also leads the effort within the Howard University College of Medicine and the RCMI program in the NIH Publication Compliance Policy and has made multiple presentations at RCMI's annual symposium regarding the policy's impact. So without further ado, Ms. Stacy McCray.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well and staying safe. So today we're going to go over the NIH public compliance policy as it pertains to whether or not you are on a grant, whether it be RCMI, your own. It's mandatory pretty much across the board. So the policy came in act pretty much in 2018 that requires all investigators funded by NIH to submit or have submitted them to the National Library of Medicine's PubMed Central website. So what that entails is basically having your manuscript or publication available for public view if you have received any type of NIH funding. And it has to be available to the public no later than 12 months after the official date of the publication. Next slide. So the policy applies to any manuscript that is peer-reviewed, accepted for publication in a journal, and resulting from research supported in whole or part by any direct funding from an NIH grant of cooperative agreement, direct funding from NIH contract, or from an NIH employee, which means if you are talking in relation to the RCMI program, if you are a user of our program or have been a user and received any funding during that time period that has enabled you to produce research results, which comes out in a manuscript or publication, that it must be submitted for compliance. So today we'll pretty much go through the steps of that, what that entails and what it means. Next slide. So definitional article types, a final published article or final peer review manuscript. So depending on which one that is, will determine which method that you actually submit to NIH public access policy. So if it is a final published article, it must be submitted by methods A or B, final peer-reviewed manuscript method C or D, which will go into more depth. Next slide. So PubMed versus PubMed Central. So there has been confusion with a lot of people where they think that they have been in compliance. So if you look online or if you look at your manuscript under any PubMed website, you'll see something either saying your PMID or PMC ID. They are very different. A PMID is just a unique identifier of your publication, but does not connotate or does not say that you are in compliance. A PMC ID, which is a unique identifier, pretty much states that you are in compliance of the policy. So those are two very different numbers, which you will see. You'll have, and you can have both at the same time, PMID followed by a PMC ID. Next slide. So PubMed Central Full Text Archives. So this is pretty much where you will find all of the manuscripts, scientific journals. So there's about 5 million plus of full text articles, different portfolios, and deposits of journals. Next slide. So addressing the copyright. All RCMI investigators, core lab users, or if you have an NIH grant, not necessarily referring to RCMIs, are responsible for ensuring full compliance of the public access policy. We encourage authors to consider who will submit the paper and/or approve the submission, what version of the paper will be made available to PMC, and when will be submitted, and when the paper will be made public on PMC. So going back a little bit, you want to put a timeline in order, or already have the steps in line in order when you know you're going to put a manuscript together and submit. We'll go further in depth here in the webinar, talking about if you have to manually put that in, or you could be in a position where your journal will actually deposit the paper for you. But these are things to consider while you are thinking about your manuscript and how it will actually go in for compliance. Next slide.
Ms. McCray, we have one question in the chat, and it's from Dr. Fongwei, and he wants to know, does the publication policy apply to articles published before or after 2018?
2008. It's for papers published after 2008.
Thank you.
So posting papers, methods A and B straight into PubMed Central. So this will help you, this gives you a little bit of a tutorial on how to submit. A and B refer to how the publisher will submit. Next slide. Method C and D refer to an author submitting and also a publisher submitting. And in that in between, you'll see the difference of if you submit, you will have what is called an NIH MS or NIH Manuscript Submission Number, which tells the system that you are in the process of obtaining your PMC ID. Next slide. So identifying submission methods by journal name. So if you are trying to submit, and what you see here now is a snapshot of the public access policy and tells you how and when to comply, pretty much going back over a little bit of what we talked about so far, preparing your manuscript, accept it for publication, and reporting to NIH. So when you are also submitting your manuscript, you also have what is called an acknowledgement section in your manuscript or publication, where you acknowledge what grants were in support of your manuscript. That pretty much addresses the copyright somewhat, or the acknowledgement. So maybe jumping a little bit further ahead, but if you acknowledge any grant in your acknowledgement section, when your manuscript is recognized by PubMed, it'll automatically take that grant out and then put that grant into non-compliance if it does not have at PMC ID. We'll talk about that a little bit further. Next slide. So NIH manuscript system, submitting and tracking manuscripts. Next slide. So the NIH process. So the author submits to PMC documents, and this pretty much gives you a little bit of timeline of sometimes how long it takes. It can take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. You deposit your files, author or publisher initiates file deposit, the initial approval, the reviewer assigned at the time of deposit, author PI approves submission, the conversion, deposit files converted to PMC format, final approval, reviewer reviews and approves PMC documents, and then PMC. So as you'll see here, this process is not just a one-step process. You will find sometimes you have to approve twice here, which pretty much is a streamlined process, or during the time after your initial approval during your conversion, the officers who go back and help put this into PMC for compliance will see that you may have missed depositing, and this is if you self-deposit a supplement graph that you have that is an attachment that you may not have put in. So you need all your materials in order to streamline the process if you are depositing yourself. Next slide. Depositing files. Here gives you a little bit of a background of determining who's the responsible party. Again, there are publishers who will submit for you. If not, you have to submit, or your PI may initiate the deposit for you. If you are on the RCMI grant, you may have seen myself deposit papers for you to ensure compliance. And you see here, as of February 2019, the files or publishers, the publishers who will publish for you, meaning they'll put into PMC for you, versus non-journals that will. Next slide. So here you'll find a little snapshot of what the system looks like now for manuscript submission. And this is you or the author submitting, self-submitting. So here you can see you can populate from PubMed if your manuscript is already on PubMed and out of compliance, or you can enter the title of your manuscript and the journal title, which will pull from if it is in PubMed. If not, you have to manually deposit your paper. Next slide. Now, I do want to stop really quick to maybe clarify one thing. So when it comes to who is supposed to submit your paper, you may have multiple authors on a manuscript. It is responsibility of all authors for submission. Only one person needs to submit, but it's the responsibility whether you are the first, third, or fourth author to submit. And it is also your responsibility if you have not acknowledged the grant on your manuscript because you are a contributor or an author, to make sure that you are depositing on behalf of the grant that you are on as well, or the grant that has helped you or given you funds. So data set deposits in NIH. Here you'll see a little bit more of the functionality and what it looks like after you deposit your files. You'll see you have your manuscript, which you can deposit, figures, tables, and also supplemental data. It's very easy. You can drop and drag, and it'll also ask you to label what exactly you're putting in as far as files. Next slide. So initial approval. After you have done all the steps of where you've seen the snapshots of putting your paper in and depositing it, you have your initial approval. you have to make sure the correct funding is associated. Now, understand you do not have to just choose one funding announcement. You do not have to choose just one. You can put multiple grant numbers into the correct funding associated. You want to make sure the correct version is deposited, meaning the final draft or accepted manuscript. You want to make sure you have completed all of your files. You have the correct embargo assigned, which you can find. If you don't know what that is, you can go to your journal's website and find what their standards are. And finally, you want to ask, are you to reserve the right to deposit in PMC? Next slide. Conversion. So the conversion times have pretty much been up and down, but you want to make sure you give yourself adequate time that the conversion process takes. So what the conversion is, it completes, NIHMS converts completed deposits into PMC ready documents and notifies the reviewer via email when they are ready. You want to check your notifications from reviews for any mistakes or questions. So conversion is when you, from your initial deposit to when the system gives you a NIHMS number, which you can put if you are post 3 months or within the 3-month frame of when your publication has been published, that the NIHMS number will be accepted versus the PMC ID. And I believe we'll talk about that further in the slides. Next. Final approval. So here you'll see where after you have gone through the first 2 approvals, that the PMC ready version of your manuscript is now available. You can check and make sure you have the correct submission, all the numbers, and they are correct, and you will finally approve. When you hit approve, you may not necessarily get the PMC ID automatically, depending on when the embargo is or when it should become available. So I want to make note that just because you have the final approval doesn't mean you automatically receive the PMC immediately, but you will be in compliance. Next slide. PMC ID assigned. When your PMC is assigned and final approval is completed, the manuscript is matched to a PubMed record. So here you see a snapshot of what PubMed looks like. And you'll see on the right-hand corner where it says full text links, PMC full text. So depending on your article, you'll also see there where you can, if you don't have the PMC full text available, where you can link out to the sites where this article may be available. Now, if you do not have the full text PMC, you may just get the abstract version. But again, when you have the PMC ID and you click here, you'll have access to the full text article. Next slide. So when it is available in PMC, you'll see this headliner right here, where again, you'll see the difference between the PMC ID, the NIHMS ID, and also the PMID. Next slide. So here we're going to talk about a little bit of the difference between NIHMS and PMC identifiers. The NIHMS ID is assigned at the time of deposit. It can be used to demonstrate compliance for up to 3 months after publication. In the PMC ID, NIHMS deposits must complete final approval and final citation information must be available. Next slide. Rejecting manuscripts. Now, there may be a time when your manuscript may be rejected for numerous of reasons. You can connect with the NIHMS help desk to support or remove rejected manuscripts links from funding. If the publication that you have, and you can see the rejection reasons here, this paper was not supported by a PMC participating funder. I am neither an author on the paper or the PI associated funder. The paper was not peer reviewed. There's numerous of reasons why you can make sure you reject that and you link it from your funding to not be held, not within compliance. Next slide. Reporting. Next slide. For documenting compliance or how to cite papers within 3 months, you can see some of the methods here. So if you want to document compliance and you're using methods A or B, you can put PMC journal in progress. For C and D, you can use the NIH MSID ID here. But note again that the NIH MSID will not be accepted 3 months after publication. Next slide. How to cite papers archived in PMC. You can refer to the example below where you'll see if you have a bio sketch or anything, or you're reporting in a report, this is what your, this is how you should document compliance of your manuscript or publication here. Next slide. My NCBI and tools to assist with the compliance and grant reporting applications. Next slide. So there's a few ways that you can deposit your paper into NCBI system, which is where you'll deposit from PubMed. So a few of them can be, you can link from an ERA Commons account, or you can use a PMC, an NCBI login. So ERA Commons link users can associate publications with NIH grants. It tracks compliance and also creates a PDF format for other reporting. Next slide. So signing into NCBI, this is where you can log in to PubMed as well, or this can be a login for you when you are submitting for compliance. And this is what the site looks like. And you can also link to a few other options here if you want to explore. Next slide. Here is also where you can log into NCBI directly. Next slide. So which ERA user should have a linked My Bibliography account? So let's talk about what a My Bibliography is. So if you all are associated, or everyone here should have a bio sketch. So there's a part where under the new bio sketches where you have a link to your bibliography. So you can list some of your manuscripts and publications, and instead of listing the entirety of them, you can link to what's called a My Bibliography. Every PI of a grant should have one. And you can also link to it from the PubMed site where articles are. So again, all principal investigators should have a My Bibliography, and anyone else with NIH support who is or was an author, because you can, again, use that as a link on your bio sketch. Next slide. So my NCBI dashboard of tools. Here you'll see a few different things. If you want to go down to the right where it also says My Bibliography, if you would click there under your own login, that's where you can access your bibliography. And it'll tell you also whether or not you have journals or manuscripts that are not in compliance. Next slide. So this is what the My Bibliography actually looks like. So you can see up here where it has a check for ones that are in compliance, ones that do not need to be in compliance or not considered for compliance, and 2 in red where, or I'm sorry, also going back to if they don't have a circle, that they are in progress. And 2, where you see the red question mark, means they are not in compliance. So again, this just gives you a little bit snapshot of what the My Bibliography is. This is also a downloadable PDF ready document that you can include also in for compliance reasons. Or if you just want a snapshot of all of your linked manuscripts of publication, whether they be your own or linked to an actual grant. Next slide. So adding citations from PubMed into my bibliography. Again, we're back to the PubMed website through NCBI. So you would click to send, so if you are looking at a search result of all of your manuscripts, you could click all of them here and make sure that they are linked to your bibliography by clicking under Send To. And as long as you are logged into my NCBI, you can click My Bibliography and add all of them at one time to your bibliography. You can do that individually if you are in one separate search result, or you can, again, here, click multiple ones. Next slide. Compliance features for ERA linked users. Again, same snapshot here. So ERA linked users will usually be those that have, well, let's say this is a snapshot of someone who has a large grant. And these are all the listed publications under that grant, is why this one probably will be as large, which is usually, again, an ERA linked user. Next slide. Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, go back. So here you'll see what we were referring to earlier about what it'll look like if you are in compliance, in progress, or you are exempt. So here you'll see all the different stages, with green being compliance, blue meaning in process, and see it refers back to the NIH MSID. The gray where it says it's not applicable or exempt. This could be from it not having the funding, let's say from a different type of grant, or it could be from a different subject of research. Again, you'll see in the red where it's not compliant because the citation isn't there. Next slide. And here you will see this from the bibliography as well. If you right click on one of the boxes that are red, green, or gray, where you can click to add awards or take them off. Now, usually here, if you have already assigned something and you see what's here is a padlock, you would have to contact the help desk to get them to remove it by showing them why it should not be linked for whatever reason that may be. Next slide. Here is also another box where you'll see if you want to search for a new award to attach to your bibliography or a selected publication on that. Next slide. And here is a generated report of the bibliography and what that looks like from the downloadable page, a PDF report here. And again, it shows whether it's in progress, complete, and will also show if it's incomplete. Next. So here you can get a list of participating journals, find out more about what PubMed Central has to offer. You can link to the submission system here from this link. So if you all want to look at this link, write it down, a snapshot of it, and also these slides will be available to those who need them. Next slide. You can look up articles with PMC IDs and PubMed. As you can see here, you can search straight from the PMC number. You can also do the same thing with the PMID as well. Next slide. So non-adherence to the NIH compliance policy. Next. For pending and non-competing continuation awards, this is a big deal. So awards can be placed on hold until grantees have demonstrated compliance, and my NCBI is required to report papers when electronically submitting progress reports. So what happens here, again, going back to arrow number 1 about why this is a huge policy, not even for RCMI, but across any NIH awardees or Howard University in general. Money will not be given for year 2, year 3, or even if you have been accepted for funding, if all of your papers are not in compliance. NIH will hold money if even one publication is not in compliance with this policy. So it is a huge deal to anyone with NIH funding. Next slide. Here it talks about our acknowledgement. If you are a participant or a user of RCMI, you want to use this award number here in the acknowledgement in your manuscript, please. If at any time you can't find this number, please contact us in the office, because your adherence to this makes our life a lot easier. And also yours when you have to go back and figure out how to submit your papers, which may take a longer process. Next slide. Here are some resources about the policy. Statement, sponsor programs, questions. The submission system links are here with also tutorials and link to PubMed Central. Next slide. And that's it. So if anyone has any questions, comments, or needs a little bit more clarification on the policy, feel free.
Thank you, Ms. Gerald. We will take any questions that we have from the audience. You can unmute yourself and ask questions. While the crowd is coming, I have one general question. I wonder why, if you put the grant information in your manuscript, why isn't it automatically put into PubMed or into the ID component?
Because it depends on who you are submitting through the journal. So if the journal does not put it into the system for you, even though you have the acknowledgement, it will not automatically be into compliance. So it won't automatically generate that ID for you. So you have journals that will submit on your behalf and journals that will not. So if you know that you have a journal that does not submit on your behalf, once you have that full peer-reviewed publication, you should submit at that time.
And I would think that you would recommend that every individual check on this after they have successfully published an article.
That should be the first thing they do. Well, you should know, first of all, when the journal that you're submitting to, whether or not they are one of the ones that submit on your behalf. If not, you should have a plan in place to submit or ask someone to help you submit.
Thank you. Any other questions? So you mentioned that these slides will be available. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Well, it doesn't appear that we have any more questions from the audience. So thank you again. Thank you very much. And thank everyone for joining us today.
All right.
Thank you, Ms. Gerald.
Thank you all. Stay tuned for our series in the spring. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.